Hello everyone, this is Dr. Govind Rai Garg. As you all know, these days PG entrance exams they are focusing more on conceptual learning and integration of different subjects. So we are bringing to you this video in which top educators will be talking about breast cancer in an integrative manner. Dr. Vivek Jain will be discussing about epidemiology, Dr. Sparsh Gupta about pathophysiology, Dr. Pritesh Singh about surgical aspects and diagnosis, Dr. Deepak Marba about treatment, and myself will be talking about the drugs used in breast cancer. Wait guys, there is a surprise also. Listen to the complete video. At the end, there will be one question and you need to answer that question correctly and a lucky winner will get some prize. But the lucky winner will be chosen by the software which choose only the subscribers. So don't forget to like and subscribe our channel, and that lucky winner will get one of the subscription from the top 5 educators in this video, absolutely free. So what are you waiting for? Listen to this integrated video. Thank you.
Hello friends, I am Dr. Vivek Jain. On behalf of Top Educators Live, I welcome you to the topic Breast Cancer, integrated lecture for conceptual learning. Friends, we shall be covering the breast cancer topic under the following headings: epidemiology of breast cancer, risk factors and pathophysiology, clinical presentation, diagnosis, surgical management, medical treatment, drugs and pharmacology, and finally prevention and control measures for breast cancer. Hello friends, I am Dr. Vivek Jain. So first of all, I will pitch in with epidemiology of breast cancer. Looking at the problem statement of breast cancer, when we look incidence wise in the world and Indian population, globally, breast cancer is the second most common cancer in the world, just preceded by lung cancer. If you look at India, breast cancer is the most common cancer not just of females, but overall total population combined incidence wise. Mind you friends, this is the latest Globocan data for cancers in world and India. This you need to remember in extensive detail for all your examinations. Let us move forward. When we look at prevalence wise, then whether it is global data or Indian data, in both, breast cancer is the most common cancer overall combined for males and females population. When we look at mortality, then globally lung, stomach and liver cancer mortality is higher than breast cancer. But when we come to our country India, again breast cancer is the cancer having highest mortality among all the cancers in the country. So just to summarize, when we look globally worldwide, then breast cancer is the second most common cancer according to incidence. But according to prevalence, it is the cancer with highest prevalence in the world. Similarly, when we summarize the breast cancer problem and its extent in India, then breast cancer is the most common cancer of Indian population overall, not just females only. It has highest incidence among all the cancers, highest prevalence, this is 5-year prevalence among all the cancers. Also it has highest mortality among all the cancers in the country. Now when you look at exact proportion wise in the country, then incidence wise breast cancer contributes 14% of total cancers. Prevalence wise it is around 3/5 or more than 60% of the total cancer 5-year prevalence. Mortality wise it contributes 11% of the total mortality combined from all the cancers. Across all the three, according to latest data, breast cancer is number 1 in all these parameters. So please remember, in India, when we specifically talk of our country, breast cancer is number 1 cancer of females, overall population also. Incidence wise also, prevalence wise also, mortality wise also. Now friends, after having discussed the epidemiology of breast cancer with you, I would pass on the pink ribbon to Dr. Sparsh Gupta, who will be discussing with you the risk factors and the pathophysiology of breast cancer. So over to you sir, Dr. Sparsh Gupta.
Thank you, Dr. Vivek Jain sir. I am now going to talk about with you the pathophysiology of development of breast cancer. Now here we must understand that because of non-genetic as well as genetic factors, the normal cells in the breast tissue are going to get converted into the malignant cells. So let us just look at these factors one by one. Now, when we talk about the non-genetic factors, we must understand the different types of risk factors for development of breast cancer. The first one happens to be the sex of an individual. Easy for us to understand, 99% of the breast cancers are going to be seen in case of females, whereas just 1% of them are going to be seen in case of males. Whereas when we make a mention of something like age of an individual, increasingly the risk of development of breast cancer is going to be seen with advancing age of a lady. What we also must remember over here is a fact that the average age at which a female is going to be diagnosed with breast cancer in the Indian population is going to be around 42 years, and this is almost 10 years younger to her counterpart in the Western population, where the females are going to be having the development of the breast cancer at an average age of around 53 years. As and when we make a mention of something like the family history, it's important for us to understand that if there is going to be a first degree relative of a female who is going to be suffering from breast cancer, say for example, if we talk about that the lady is going to be having her mother who was suffering from breast cancer, or we talk about a lady who was having her sister suffering from breast cancer, then the risk of development or chances of cancer development in this female is also going to increase relatively higher. Also, we need to understand the fact that there are factors like the age at menarche and the age at menopause which are going to influence the risk of development of breast cancer. What I all want you to be remember over here is early menarche and late menopause are going to be associated with development of breast cancer. We must also remember over here the role of something like parity. Now, I must tell you friends over here a simple important fact that nulliparity has been associated with a higher risk of development of breast cancer. As a concept, please do remember the fact that if you're talking about a female, the age at which she is going to be having menarche and the age at which she is going to be having her first baby, that means the first pregnancy, the difference between these two important milestones is also going to be an important risk factor. How? Please understand the fact if the gap over here between these two milestones is going to be higher, then the risk of cancer is also going to become higher. It is therefore written in majority of the books that if a female is going to be having her first child before the age of 20 years, then she is going to be having a lesser risk of development of breast cancer. But if the female is going to be having her first child beyond the age of 20 years, then definitely she is going to be at higher risk of development of breast cancer. We also need to remember about the important role that is being played by hormonal factors. Now, what I intend to tell you over here is that it is not only the estrogen, but it is also going to be the progesterone which is going to be assisting in the development of breast cancer. Undoubtedly, most of us understand even ovaries are going to be playing a very important role. The concept of hormonal factors is also going to be exemplified with the fact that if you are going to be talking about a female who is going to be breastfeeding her baby, then breastfeeding is responsible for causing better differentiation of the epithelial cells, and that has been shown to be having a protective effect so far as the risk of development of breast cancer is concerned. Apart from these factors, we must not forget that a history of breast biopsy has been shown to be having a small but definitive increase in the risk of development of breast cancer. As and when we refer to something like the dietary factors, a diet which is going to be having a higher concentration or amount of fat, as well as a diet which is going to be making an individual prone to obesity, is going to be associated with a high risk of development of breast cancer. Whenever we are looking at the socio-economic status of an individual, it is easy for us to understand that breast cancer is going to be seen in people with higher socio-economic status. Part of it can be explained by the fact that these are the very people who are more likely to be obese and are going to be consuming a high fat diet. The second factor which can explain this would be that people in the high socio-economic status are going to be having a higher age as and when they are going to be having their first baby. Now, apart from this factor, there are going to be certain factors which do play an important role in the pathogenesis of breast cancer, but which are not going to be very significant in the current times. The first example of such a factor that I wanted to be familiar with over here happens to be a history of radiation exposure. So particularly with respect to the historical perspective of history of radiation, which was happening at the time of, let us say, something like atomic bombing, yes, that was a very important risk factor. Similarly, when we were talking about the management of a malignancy, for example, when we were talking about radiation exposure for the treatment of a lymphoma, particularly in the chest region, that used to be an important risk factor for development of breast cancer. But over a period of time, currently, this is not a very important risk factor because of the uncommon chances of something like, as you understand, the bombing, as well as the better alternative modalities that we have for the treatment of lymphomas. Additionally, we need to be talking about over here the role that is being played by OCPs. Now, if we are going to be talking about the consumption of what OCPs, as in case of all the other medications, we do talk about the risk-benefit ratio. So the benefits definitely outweigh the risk. However, we must understand that OCPs, if they are being taken for a very long duration of time, then there is definitely a small but higher risk of development of breast cancer in such females. Now, apart from the non-genetic factors, the other important factors which definitely play an important role in the pathophysiology of breast cancer happens to be the genetic factors. Now, we talk about the genes over here which are going to be associated with particularly a high risk for development of familial breast cancer, and those are the genes which are going to be associated with a high degree of penetrance, which means that individuals who are going to be having such gene mutations are going to be having the manifestation of the disease. In fact, as a lot of you may be familiar, about 1/3 to 1/4 of the patients of breast cancer are going to be having the familial breast cancer, and majority of these patients are going to be having a role that is being played by two of the most important genes that we talk about now. The first example of such a gene that I wanted to remember over here is the BRCA1 gene. An example of a gene which the examiners love to go after is being located on chromosome 17q. Now, as and when we make a mention of this particular gene, this is going to be functioning as a DNA repair gene, and we must always remember the fact that these patients are going to be having a higher risk of development of breast cancer, as well as the patients are going to be having a higher risk of development of something like ovarian cancer. Similarly, if we talk about the second important gene that you associate with familial breast cancer, that is BRCA2 gene. This is an example of a gene that is going to be located on chromosome 13q, and again that is going to be associated with a higher risk for development of breast cancer as well as ovarian cancer. Please also be familiar with the fact that if a female is going to be having the familial breast cancer, then the gene more strongly associated with her is going to be BRCA1. So we definitely remember the ladies first rule. And if we are talking about the male breast cancer, then male breast cancer is going to be more importantly associated with the BRCA2 gene. Additionally, we must remember the fact that in case of a male, they are always going to be at higher risk for development of something like the prostate cancer as well as pancreatic cancer whenever they are going to be having a mutation in these genes. Now, apart from the important role that is being played by both these genes in the process of DNA repair, what we must also appreciate over here is the fact that these genes are going to be playing a very important role in the process of the normal transcription as well as the normal cell division. We do have the role that is being played by other important genes apart from BRCA1 and BRCA2, which are going to be in form of the P53 gene. Now, P53 gene is going to be associated with the high risk for development of breast cancer. There is no doubt to it. Apart from breast cancer, as a lot of you are familiar, the patients are going to be having a high risk for development of something like leukemias, or patients would be having CNS tumors, and that is an example of a condition that we are familiar is going to be given the name of the Li-Fraumeni syndrome. Be familiar with the fact that as and when we are making a mention of something like the Li-Fraumeni syndrome and the P53 gene mutation, we are going to be associating the diagnosis of this kind of a condition with a criteria which is given the name of Chomperet's criteria. The other important example of a gene that I don't want you to forget is the PTEN gene. The PTEN gene is what you are going to be associating with a condition that is loved by the examiners to be asked to you time and again, a condition that is being given the name of Cowden syndrome. PTEN would help you remember the fact, friends, that apart from breast cancer, what are the other cancers that these patients are going to be having a higher chance of being developing? So P10, T for remember thyroid, EN, endometrial carcinoma. So that is what we need to be familiar with so far as the P10 gene and its associated cancers are concerned. As and when we make a mention of something like STK11, that is serine threonine kinase 11, this is associated with development of a condition that is given the name of the Peutz-Jeghers syndrome. Recall that Peutz-Jeghers syndrome is going to be associated with the development of something like the benign polyps in the colon. Let us also be familiar with the fact that these patients are going to be having a high risk of development of different types of cancers, which can include the pancreatic cancer and which might as well include a high risk of development of something like the colon cancer. We also need to be talking about the CDH1 gene. The CDH1 gene is what you are going to be associating with an example of a condition in which the patients are going to be having the familial gastric cancer, and particularly, as I believe a lot of you may be familiar, the type of gastric cancer that you're going to be finding in these patients is going to be the signet ring cancer. Also worthy for us to recall the fact that when this kind of a gene mutation is going to be present, this is going to be associated with particularly at a microscopic level, the lobular subtype of the breast cancer. We need to recall the fact that all the genes that we are talking about over here are going to be actually example of the tumor suppressor genes. Now what we also need to be familiar with over here is the role that is being played by the PALP-B2. Now as I believe a lot of you may be familiar, PALP would stand for partner and the localizer of the BRCA2 protein. So this is again going to be playing a very important role with respect to something like the process of DNA repair. Why do we need to talk about this is because this is an example of a gene that is going to be playing an important role in the development of the hereditary breast cancer. So it is not only the role that is being played by the BRCA1 and the BRCA2 gene, friends. You need to remember about the role of P53, P10, STK11 and of course something like CDH1 and PALP. Additionally, we understand the fact that there are going to be certain genes which are going to be having a moderate penetrance. That means mutations in them are not going to be associated with very high risk of cancer. But yes, there is a definitely high risk for development of cancer. An example of such genes would include something like the ATM gene. Recall, the ATM gene is what you associate with development of a condition like ataxia telangiectasia. We also are going to be having an important role that is being played by the CHEK2 gene, and the CHEK2 gene is what is going to be important in the development of a condition that is going to be given the name of the hereditary breast cancer. Patients are going to be at higher risk for development of other cancers as well when they are going to be having a mutation in the CHEK2 gene, and these are going to be something like the prostate. The patients are going to be having a higher risk for development of something like thyroid cancer. Patients are going to be at higher risk for development of something like colon cancer, as well as a higher risk for development of something like kidney cancer. So all those genes are what you definitely need to remember so far as the genetic risk factors are concerned. We therefore understand that a normal cell in the breast tissue, because of the environmental insult as well as because of the genetic mutation in a synergistic manner, is therefore going to get converted into a mutated cell, and that is what is going to be the simple pathophysiological basis for development of the cancer in the patients. At a microscopic level, all these cancers are going to be example of adenocarcinomas.
Hello friends, so we are going to discuss the clinical features, diagnosis and management, especially the surgical aspect of breast cancer. So let's start with clinical features first. What is the most common presentation of CA breast? So the most common symptom is breast lump. So the most common symptom of CA breast, and that's breast lump. Okay, so in majority of patients, what's the location of breast lump? So the most common site of breast lump is in the upper outer quadrant. So why it's most common in upper outer quadrant? Because if we see the quadrants of breast, there is maximum amount of breast tissue in upper outer quadrant. So since maximum amount of breast tissue is in upper outer quadrant, so this is the most common site of breast cancer or the breast lump. Similarly, the least amount of breast tissue is present in the lower inner quadrant. So the least amount of breast tissue is present in the lower inner quadrant, and that's why this is the least common site. So nowadays questions are asked about most common as well as least common. So the most common site of breast cancer is upper outer quadrant, least common site is lower inner quadrant. Then breast cancer is more common in right breast or left breast. So it is more common in left breast. So most common symptom breast lump, most common site upper outer quadrant, least common site lower inner quadrant. Now see, if the patient is coming to you and the patient is an educated female, the moment she is going to notice the lump, suppose this is the lump, the moment she is going to notice the lump, immediately she will come to you, right? But suppose the female is not very educated, she is from rural area, right? And she is going to notice the lump, and now she is not coming to you, she just ignores the lump. Over a period of time, what will happen to the lump? The size of lump will start increasing. So what will happen? Can you see? The size of lump will start increasing, and when the size of lump will start increasing, what you're going to notice that there is asymmetry between the breast. So now the both breasts are asymmetrical. So there is asymmetry. After that, what will happen? There is architectural distortion, so change in the shape of breast. Later, what will happen? This lump is going to involve breast skin, it can involve nipple, it can involve chest wall. So if it is involving the breast skin, there is fixity to skin. If it is involving chest wall, the lump is fixed to chest wall, it's not mobile. And if it is involving the nipple, what will happen? You can notice there is nipple retraction, nipple deviation, and nipple ulceration. So these are the findings. So what else you can find in breast cancer? There can be asymmetry, there can be architectural distortion, architectural distortion, there can be skin fixity, skin fixity, fixity to chest wall, fixity to chest wall, right? And because of involvement of nipple, what? There is nipple retraction, there is nipple retraction, nipple deviation, and nipple ulceration, nipple deviation and nipple ulceration. Okay, now see, the most common route of spread in breast cancer is lymphatic, that's why these axillary lymph nodes are involved. But the most common site of metastasis is bone because of hematogenous spread. So because of hematogenous spread, the most common site of metastasis is bone. And in the bones, what is the most common site? It is the lumbar vertebra, right? So via hematogenous spread, the bones are involved, and most common site of metastasis, it's lumbar vertebra, followed by femur, followed by thoracic vertebra. So how to remember? The mnemonic is LFT. It is LFT. So most common site is lumbar vertebra, followed by femur, followed by thoracic vertebra. Okay. Now, what kind of secondaries are seen in bone from CA breast? Both osteolytic as well as osteoblastic secondaries. And which one is more common? It is osteolytic. So it can lead to both osteolytic as well as osteoblastic secondaries. Which one are more common? Osteolytic are more common. So in breast cancer, the patients who are having metastasis, yes, they are having signs and symptoms of metastasis. So if there is bony metastasis, since the most common site is lumbar vertebra, patient is having backache or bony pains. If there is metastasis to lungs, patient is having dyspnea. If the liver is involved, patient is having jaundice. If brain is involved, patient is having headache. Simultaneously, there is anorexia and weight loss. So what are the signs and symptoms of metastasis? The patients who are having metastasis, because of bony metastasis, there is bony pain or backache. Bony pain or backache. Because of brain metastasis, there is headache. Because of lung metastasis, there is dyspnea. Because of involvement of liver, there is jaundice, right? And there is anorexia and weight loss. Anorexia and weight loss. Clear? Now see, whenever a patient is coming to our OPD, patient with breast cancer, what we do first? We take history. After that, we perform the examination. After history and examination means after clinical assessment, we are sending this patient for radiological investigation. Which one? Mammography and ultrasound. And then we send the patient for histopathological investigations or diagnosis, and we send the patient for what? FNAC and biopsy. So what happens? There are three components: one clinical, second is imaging, and third is tissue sampling. And this kind of assessment is known as triple assessment. And how much is the positive predictive value of this triple assessment? It's 99.9%. So see the components. So first, components of triple assessment. The first component is clinical. Okay, so it includes signs and symptoms. Second is imaging, and in imaging we are going to include mammography and ultrasound. So this is mammography and ultrasound. And third is tissue sampling. Tissue sampling. Okay. And in this, FNAC and biopsy is included. FNAC and biopsy. And how much is the positive predictive value of triple assessment? It's 99.9%. This is the positive predictive value, right? Nowadays lots of image based questions are asked about breast cancer, that how beauty orange looks like, what is dimpling, what is puckering, what is cancer in cuirass, and how nipple retraction looks like. So have a look. So here you can see that the nipple is retracted in this patient. Can you see? There is nipple retraction, right? Now see this picture and tell me what are the findings. What you can see here, you can see that there is pudgy orange. Can you see? Depression with cutaneous edema, pudgy orange. And if you notice this is the nipple, and here also the nipple is retracted. This question was asked in NIMS 2 times. And the question was, what is the most conspicuous sign of breast cancer? Most obvious. So the most conspicuous or most obvious sign of breast cancer is what? Pudgy orange. What is the cause of pudgy orange? See, this is the lymphatics. Okay. So what happens? There is cutaneous permeation of tumor cells. So the tumor cells enters into lymphatics, right? And whenever tumor cells enters into the lymphatics, what is the problem? Yes, there is lymphatic obstruction, and because of this what happens? There is cutaneous edema. Cutaneous edema, right? So it's the lymphatic permeation by tumor cells which leads to pudgy orange. So this is pudgy orange. It's the most conspicuous sign of breast cancer. It's the most conspicuous sign of breast cancer, and it is caused by lymphatic permeation of tumor cells. So there is lymphatic permeation of tumor cells, right? Some students are confused between dimpling and puckering. So what is dimpling? You have seen dimples. Have a look. Can you see? So dimples means depression. So whenever in the skin there is depression, that is dimpling. Okay. And puckering means, have you seen crumpled paper? Right. So skin wrinkling like this. Yes, wrinkling. So the puckering is wrinkling of skin and dimpling is depression in the skin. And in both there is involvement of ligament of Cooper. So tell me which one is dimpling. Can you see here? There is skin depression. So this is dimpling. Is the skin depression. Clear? So this is dimpling. And here, can you see? There is wrinkling in the skin or skin fold, and this is known as puckering. This is puckering. And in both dimpling as well as in puckering, there is involvement of which ligament? In both of these conditions, there is involvement of ligament of Cooper. Involvement of ligament of Cooper. The third appearance which is asked is cancer in cuirass. So in cancer in cuirass, there are multiple nodules in the skin because of involvement of breast, skin and chest wall. How it looks like? So here you can see that these are the nodules. There is ulceration also. So this is known as cancer in cuirass. So this is cancer in cuirass. Clear? And there are presence of multiple nodules in the breast skin because of involvement of breast skin and chest wall. So these are the image based questions which are asked frequently nowadays. Now coming to the investigations. So what is the first investigation done in a suspected case of breast cancer? See the language, suspected case of breast cancer. So first investigation done in a suspected case of breast cancer is mammography. An investigation of choice for diagnosis of breast cancer is biopsy, which is also known as true cut biopsy, also known as core cut biopsy, also known as needle biopsy. Clear? Third question, what is the investigation of choice for screening of breast cancer? And the investigation of choice for screening of breast cancer is what? It's mammography. So at what age mammography should be started in all the females? Initially this cutoff was 40 years, but nowadays it is 45 years. So in all the females who are 45 years or of more age, the mammography is recommended. So investigation of choice for screening of breast cancer is mammography. But the problem, there are certain high risk females. What is a high risk female? If a female is having positive family history, high risk female means Angelina Jolie, classical example. So if the female is having positive family history, or she is having mutation, which one? BRCA1 or BRCA2. So BRCA1 or BRCA2 mutation. So this female is high risk female, and the investigation of choice for screening of breast cancer in high risk females is what? It's MRI. It's MRI. And you must be knowing that MRI is investigation of choice for breast implant related complications. Any patient of breast cancer in which we are going to suspect that there is metastasis, so what is the investigation of choice for distant metastasis? It is PET scan. It's the PET scan. And if there is bone metastasis, and if we want to see whether there is bone metastasis or not, we have to scan the bone. So for bone metastasis, what is the investigation of choice for diagnosis? You have to scan the bone, and that is what? Bone scan. So all these are questions. So first, what is the first investigation done in a suspected case of breast cancer? And that's mammography. We discussed two more questions related to mammography. This is the investigation of choice for screening of breast cancer. Okay, and at what age it should be started? 45 years. What is the investigation of choice for diagnosis of breast cancer? And that's biopsy, other name true cut biopsy, core cut biopsy, needle biopsy. Investigation of choice for screening of breast cancer in high risk females. In high risk females, investigation of choice for screening, and that is MRI. And we discussed another important point related to MRI, that MRI is investigation of choice for diagnosis of implant related complications. Implant related complications. Clear? Lots of females are using implant for breast augmentation and breast reconstruction, and if there is any complication, we can easily detect by MRI. If we are suspecting the distant metastasis, investigation of choice for distant metastasis, for distant metastasis, and that's PET scan, and that is PET scan, right? And for bone metastasis, investigation of choice for bone metastasis, and that's bone scan. That's bone scan. Okay, now see the problem. The females who are young, age less than 35 years, those females are having dense and glandular breast, right? Dense and glandular breast, and because of this dense and glandular breast, the sensitivity of MRI is low, and that's why in these females the first investigation done is ultrasound. So see this language. What is the first investigation done in a young female less than 35 years with breast lump? What? With breast lump, and that's ultrasound. So first investigation done. First investigation done in a young female less than 35 years of age with breast lump. There should be breast lump. So with breast lump, and the investigation is what? Ultrasound. Now, the most important aspect of breast cancer, the management. Management is based on staging. So, staging of breast cancer is very important. You have to remember. Now, see the management. Management of breast cancer. Right. So, first is early invasive breast cancer. Which stages are included in early invasive breast cancer? Stage 1, stage 2A, stage 2B. Right. So, first is early invasive breast cancer, right? And what are the stages? Here the stages are 1, 2A, 2B. Now, what is the principle we follow in patients who are having early invasive breast cancer? In all patients, we have to go for breast conservation surgery until and unless there is contraindication. Right, so we have to go for breast conservation surgery until unless there is contraindication. With breast conservation surgery, we go for axillary lymph node sampling, that's also known as sentinel lymph node biopsy. And in patients of breast conservation surgery, obviously to avoid the post operative recurrence, yes, we have to give what? Radiotherapy. So what's the preferred treatment option? We go for breast conservation surgery plus sentinel lymph node biopsy plus radiotherapy. And suppose there is any contraindication to breast conservation surgery, in those cases we go for simple mastectomy. The other name of simple mastectomy is total mastectomy. Clear? So the other option is simple, that's also known as total mastectomy, right? Plus sentinel lymph node biopsy. Okay. Now, after surgery, the specimen is sent to the pathology department. After pathological assessment, when you get the biopsy report, you have to decide whether you will give adjuvant chemotherapy or not. What is adjuvant? Adjuvant means given after surgery. What is neoadjuvant? Neoadjuvant means given before surgery. So, question: what are the indications of adjuvant chemotherapy in early invasive breast cancer? So, here indications of adjuvant chemotherapy, right? So first is size of tumor, and it should be more than 1 centimeter. Second, if there is lymph node positive, so positive lymph node. Third, if size is more than 0.5 centimeter and lymph nodes are negative, but patient is having adverse prognostic factors. So with adverse prognostic factors. Clear? So what are those adverse prognostic factors? First is lymphovascular invasion. Lymphovascular invasion. Second is high histological grade. High histological grade. Right? ERPR should be negative. ERPR means estrogen receptor, progesterone receptor. So this is hormone receptor, right? So hormone receptor should be negative, and HER2 should be positive. Clear? So if any of this factor is there, we have to give chemotherapy in post-operative period, and that is adjuvant chemotherapy. Okay, so this is the management of early invasive breast cancer. Now see locally advanced breast cancer. Second is LABC. The full form is locally advanced breast cancer. And what are the stages included in locally advanced breast cancer? The stages included are 3A, 3B, and 3C. Now there is a very simple concept of understanding for locally advanced breast cancer. What's that? See, if the malignancy is locally advanced, what you have to do? First, downstage the tumor. So how you are going to downstage the tumor? You have to give neoadjuvant chemotherapy. Clear? So neoadjuvant chemotherapy, it is going to downstage the tumor, then perform modified radical mastectomy. In short, it's known as MRM. And to avoid recurrence, For loco-regional control, we give what? Post-operative radiotherapy. So what's the management in locally advanced breast cancer? Neoadjuvant chemotherapy plus MRM plus radiotherapy. MRM is modified radical mastectomy. Third is certain patients are coming with metastatic breast cancer. So metastatic breast cancer. And what's the stage here? Obviously, the stage is 4. When a patient is having metastasis, you know that this patient is going to die, right? So in this, we have to follow two principles. First, prolong the survival and improve the quality of life. We have two treatment options, especially in metastasis. One is chemotherapy and second is hormone therapy. Chemotherapy prolongs the survival, but hormone therapy is having lesser side effects. So usually we prefer what? Hormone therapy. But indication whether we are going to use chemotherapy or hormone therapy, it will be dependent on the conditions. Okay. So what are the indications of chemotherapy and hormone therapy? See. In metastatic breast cancer, we follow two principles: prolong the survival, and improve the quality of life. Improve the quality. Improve the quality of life. We have two options. We have hormone therapy and we have chemotherapy. Clear? See the indications. First of all, indications of hormone therapy. Hormone therapy. Clear? So common sense indications. For hormone therapy, what should be positive? The hormone receptors. So ER/PR should be positive. So first, ER/PR should be positive. Second is asymptomatic visceral metastasis. Asymptomatic visceral metastasis. And third is bony or soft tissue metastasis. So bony or soft tissue metastasis. Clear? Now see what are the indications of chemotherapy, and it's a common sense indication. Clear? Here you can see ER/PR positive. So obviously, what is the indication for chemotherapy? ER/PR negative. Here you can see asymptomatic visceral metastasis. So for chemotherapy, what is an indication? Symptomatic visceral metastasis. Clear? So see, first is ER/PR negative. Second is symptomatic. It's the symptomatic visceral metastasis. Clear? And third is hormone refractory. Hormone refractory. Okay. So what is hormone refractory tumor? Means you are giving hormone therapy, even after 3 cycles of hormone therapy, there is no improvement. So in these cases, we go for chemotherapy. Then a question is asked that what are the indications of radiotherapy? Now see, in breast conservation surgery, we were giving radiotherapy to prevent the recurrence. For loco-regional control in locally advanced breast cancer, we were giving radiotherapy to prevent recurrence. Whenever we resect the tumor and margin is positive, we have to give radiotherapy. And whenever the lymph nodes are positive, how many? 4 or more lymph nodes. In that case also we give radiotherapy. So what are the indications of radiotherapy? Indications of radiotherapy. Clear? First, breast conservation surgery. Second, locally advanced breast cancer. Third, 4 or more positive lymph nodes. And fourth, positive margins. Positive margins. Clear? So this is the brief outline how we are going to manage the breast cancer. Now let's discuss the surgical aspect. So before discussing the mastectomy, you should understand that what are the various lymph node levels in relation to breast and in relation to a muscle, that's pectoralis minor. So in relation to breast, we are going to divide lymph node levels into 3. 1, 2, 3. Now see, this is pectoralis minor, right? So what is level 1? Level 1 is below and lateral. Level 2 is behind pectoralis minor, and level 3 is medial and above. So level 1 include anterior, posterior and lateral. Level 2 includes central and interpectoral. This interpectoral lymph node is also known as what? Rotors. And this level 3 is known as apical. Okay. Now see what we do in mastectomy. This is breast. Clear? This is nipple and this is areola. Now see, this is the breast lump. Okay. So whenever we perform mastectomy, what kind of incision is given? We are giving the elliptical incision. Elliptical incision, and the skin overlying the lump is always included in the incision, right? And after that, what you are going to do? Can you see? You are going to remove this part. So you are going to remove this much. So what you are going to remove in simple or total mastectomy? You can see nipple, areola, skin, breast tissue and breast mass. So this is simple mastectomy, which includes the removal of nipple, areola, skin, breast tissue, breast mass. Now with simple mastectomy, if you remove level 1 lymph node, it becomes extended mastectomy. If with simple mastectomy you remove level 1, level 2 lymph node, now it becomes modified radical mastectomy. And with simple mastectomy you remove level 1, level 2, level 3 lymph node with excision of pectoralis minor and major, then it becomes radical mastectomy, and the other name of radical mastectomy is Halsted radical mastectomy. Clear? So you can see this is what? This is the simple mastectomy, and in this we go for en bloc removal of nipple, areola, skin, breast tissue, breast mass. En bloc removal of nipple, areola, skin, breast tissue, breast mass. What is extended mastectomy? In extended mastectomy, we go for removal of simple mastectomy plus removal of level 1 lymph node. What is modified radical mastectomy, also known as MRM? So in MRM, we go for removal of nipple, areola, skin, breast tissue, breast mass. Clear? And which lymph nodes? Level 1 and level 2 plus removal of level 1 and 2 lymph nodes. What is radical mastectomy or Halsted radical mastectomy? So what's Halsted? What's Halsted radical mastectomy? Clear? So in this case, we go for removal of nipple, areola, skin, breast tissue, breast mass plus level 1, 2, 3 lymph node, 1, 2, 3 lymph node plus excision of pectoralis major and minor. This you have to remember, excision of pectoralis major and minor, right? So an important point related to Halsted radical mastectomy, that these structures are removed but 3 important structures are spared or preserved. So what are those 3 important structures which are preserved? The mnemonic is ABC. So ABC is spared. A means axillary vein, B means Bell's nerve. What is the other name of Bell's nerve? The Bell's nerve is also known as long thoracic nerve, right? And C means cephalic vein. C means cephalic vein. So it's the axillary vein, Bell's nerve and cephalic vein, right? These structures are spared. So these are the types of mastectomy. Nowadays the questions are asked related to modifications of MRM. Now see, there is a modification known as Auchincloss modification. It's same as MRM. Then there are 2 other modifications. One is Patey's and one is Scanlon's. See, Patey's wanted to remove level 3 lymph node, which is apical, right? So for removing level 3 lymph node, what he did, he excised pectoralis minor and then he removed the level 3, right? Scanlon told Patis that rather than excising this pectoralis minor, what you do, you divide it, remove level 3 and resuture it. So in Scanlons, there is division, not the excision, and in Patis, there is excision. Okay, so see the modifications of MRM. Modifications of MRM. So first is Auchincloss. It is same as MRM. After that, there is Patis modification. Patis modification. Clear? So this is en bloc removal of nipple, areola skin, breast tissue, breast mass, right? Plus level 1, 2, 3 lymph nodes plus excision of pectoralis minor. It's the excision of pectoralis minor. Simple. And what's the Scanlon's modification? There is division, not the excision. Scanlon's modification, everything is same. At the place of excision, there is division, not the excision. So it's the division, not the excision of pectoralis minor. So what we do, we go for en bloc removal of nipple, areola skin, breast tissue, breast mass plus level 1, 2, 3 lymph node with division, not the excision of pectoralis minor. So this is surgical management of breast cancer.
Hi guys, welcome back. I shall be now talking about treatment related to breast cancer. But before I go into the protocols and the chemotherapeutic regimens that are used, I would like you to revise regarding the molecular subtypes of breast cancer that you are aware of. And usually, a lot of students come up with these queries related to luminal A and luminal B molecular subtypes. Well, how to remember this? You see, what I'm trying to highlight here is a picture of Tom Cruise. You see, he has this boyish charm about it. I mean, he's almost 50 plus years, but he still has that innocent look about it. You know, boys are supposed to be innocent. I know you would laugh over the fact that boys are innocent. Obviously, that's not the case. But still, he has this boyish, innocent look about it, and boys are supposed to be sensitive. So what I'm trying to say here is just trying to make you remember the fact that when it comes to molecular subtype luminal B, it is a chemosensitive breast cancer. On the other hand, if you look at the image on the left hand side, you can see a nasty aggressive joker. So when I'm talking about an aggressive chap, or in Hindi, I can use the word, akhand and akadu kinds, right? So luminal A is gonna be rather chemo resistant. So that's just to make you remember the fact that molecular subtype A, alphabet A, aggressive, so it's gonna be chemo resistant, and luminal B is gonna be chemosensitive. The boyish looks of Tom Cruise can maybe help you remember that. Now, do remember the fact that when it comes to 5-year survival rate for breast cancer, for initial stage of breast cancer, the survival rate goes up to 99%. But as you go down the order, you can definitely see that the survival rate is dramatically reducing. So you can see that when you reach stage 3A, then it's less than 50%. As we go relatively lesser, it's not that I expect you to remember these figures, but look at stage 4, the 5-year survival rate is only 14%. So do remember the fact that early, anyway, the objective of medical science is early diagnosis. If you make early diagnosis, the quality of life in a person can definitely be enhanced. So, well, what are the strategies which are available, or the technical term that I'm going to use is adjuvant systemic therapies. We have chemotherapy, we have hormonal therapy, and you can definitely appreciate the fact that the acceptability component of chemotherapy is definitely going to be bad. Because when you talk to a non-medico that we're going to start chemotherapy for this cancer, most of the time the person is going to come up with a large number of queries. The acceptability part of hormonal therapy is much higher as compared to chemotherapy. But then what are the advantages? Why are we using a chemotherapy? That's because of the fact that it definitely reduces the recurrence risk of breast cancer. Like the recurrence risk at 10 years for a T4 cancer with positive lymph nodes, T4 is fairly big, right? With positive lymph nodes, it can be reduced by as much as 30%. And for the cancer with worse prognosis, as you know from pathology, the triple negative breast cancer, if you give chemotherapy in a triple negative breast cancer, the recurrence rate is reduced by almost one third. So, well, are we gonna give chemotherapy? Are we gonna use endocrine therapy? Are we gonna use an anti-HER2 that you all are aware of, that is human epidermal growth factor receptor 2? So, are we gonna use a molecule against it? How do we decide? Is it the whims and fancies of doctors, or is it technology? So we are now using definitely technology or artificial intelligence to enhance our, I would say, approach to a patient with breast cancer. We are using artificial intelligence, we are using scoring patterns to increase the success rate of our treatment. So what is the technology that we are using? We are using a oncotype DS recurrence score. Now, obviously, we go in for immunohistochemical staining. You very well know about it. I'll speak a few words about immunohistochemical staining as well. But what I'm trying to say is that the more you use artificial intelligence, the survival rate of the patients can definitely be increased. Let me just give an example, like for oncotype DS recurrence score, and there are many more other commercial strategies available for you to optimize the treatment of your patient. Now, before I go into the commercial names for Oncotype DX, this would do analysis of 21 genes, and it would tell you regarding the recurrence score. And I'll also show you a report, so that if you see a report of recurrence score, I mean, you are not suddenly flummoxed, or you are not suddenly surprised when a patient puts up a paper in front of you and says, Doctor, can you just analyze this report? Please appreciate the fact that whether you read these terms like Prosigna or EndoPrect or breast cancer index, the bottom line is these are commercial names for the scoring patterns that we are using to optimize the treatment of our patients with breast cancer. So let me pick up a scenario like a person is estrogen receptor positive. I'll explain to you what I mean by the word ER positive, but the lymph nodes are not involved, axillary lymph nodes are not involved, and the Oncotype DX system is telling you a low recurrence score. This means that this is a luminal A, and if it is a luminal A, as I've already explained to you, here there is no much advantage of chemotherapy. On the other hand, if you are reading about a question, and I'm definitely going to give you a MCQ in the end, and if you get that question right, I mean, you have a definitive chance of getting a free app, as sir has already explained. So do listen to this discussion with a lot of care. And if you're having a person who's estrogen receptor positive, nodes are still negative, but our recurrence score is high, we call it luminal B, and that is where chemotherapy will definitely be required. So the bottom line that I'm trying to give you is that we are trying to use AI now in our treatment protocols for breast cancer so as to optimize the treatment for the patient. For tumor growth rates, you see, we have these parameters like Ki67, but as Harrison says, Ki67 is not recommended for clinical decisions. And for HER2/neu, you very well know the fact. I mean, I can put up a question to you guys. I mean, what does NEU stand for? NEU, right? uh, a lot of students, when I ask them this, they come up with varied answers. So I just thought I'll mention about what do you mean by the word new. You see, this was actually a receptor. You know the full form of HER2. So this was actually the receptor for human epidermal growth factor receptor 2. The new basically means that this oncogene was first identified in rat neuroglioblastoma cells. So because the term is very big, no, neuroglioblastoma cells, they decided to keep only the word new, just to give importance to where it was first identified. So HER2/neu is anyway revolutionary from the treatment of breast cancer perspective, because when we use Herceptin, when we use trastuzumab, then the survival chances definitely increase in the individual. So the message from this slide is that we are using artificial intelligence as well. We are using sophisticated algorithms. And well, what do you mean by the word ER positivity, or what do you mean by the word ER negativity? Because when I ask this question in a routine face-to-face class, I find the students, suddenly are looking left, right. Okay, they know it's ER positive, they know it's ER negative, but what do you mean by the word ER negative, or how can you evaluate that from a report? So please remember the fact that obviously a pathologist is going to do this job, immunohistochemical staining. If there is more than 10% of positive cells for estrogen receptor, that is when you mean the word ER positive. But if the percentage written in the printout of the report is 0 to 1% ER positive, that means that there is no benefit of treatment. So actually in the report, it will not be written positive, negative, it will rather be written in percentage. If you read a report 80%, 70%, that is okay. But what I'm trying to tell you is ER positivity, where endocrine therapy will be useful for the patient, is where the report says more than 10% of the total cells of the specimen that you have sent. On the other hand, if it is 0 to 1%, there is no benefit of endocrine therapy. Similarly, for HER2 report, what is going to be written in the printout? If you read words like 3 plus, it means it is positive. If it is 0 to 1 plus, it is negative. And there are two methods by which HER2 can be identified. One of the methods is FISH, and the second method you can see anyway is the standard immunohistochemical staining. So there are two methods, and the report of FISH is in the printout will look a little different. How the report would look like, it will say these words, it will say HER2 to centromere ratio. And the reason why I'm explaining these to you is that if let me say a family member, relative, or a distant relative shows you a report or sends you a report on a WhatsApp, I mean, you should be able to interpret what is meant by HER2 positivity. If the report is for IHC, the report will mention 3 plus. So, or if it is 0 to 1, it says, it will not say, or your ability to interpret the report is what I'm trying to say here. Because you see, the report is one of the parameters on basis of which you would definitely start treating your patient. So analysis is definitely possible on your side for treatment of these patients. Now let's take up the endocrine therapy, and we have two approaches, as you are aware of. One is SERMs, that is we would be using tamoxifen. Second would be we would be going in for estrogen depletion. Now, when it comes to tamoxifen, you are aware from pharmacology that it would cause a estrogen receptor antagonism as well as a agonism. The tissues in which it will contribute to antagonism, and that is the beneficial effect, would be one, breast tissue, and second would be brain. And in case it talks about agonism, then you're aware of the fact that the agonism component would be related to the bone, it would be related to the liver, and would be related to the uterus of the patient. Now, because of the antagonism effect on the breast, you see it is useful for prevention, adjuvant, metastatic settings related to breast cancer, and it also decreases the chances of osteopenia. But at the same time, there is a disadvantage as well. So, what is the disadvantage that you should be specially concerned about when you are giving tamoxifen for the patient is increased incidence of thrombotic events. There can be increased incidence of definitely a development of endometrial cancer. So do remember that every cloud has a silver lining. There can be advantages, there can be disadvantages, and it is the disadvantages that we should be concerned about. The second approach that we have in endocrine therapy is estrogen depletion. Now do remember these words very carefully, because majority of MCQs which are going to be based on estrogen receptor positivity, they are going to give you a situation of either a pre or a postmenopausal female. If it's a premenopausal female, you can definitely go in for oophorectomy. Or let me say, if she's not very comfortable with oophorectomy, you can definitely suppress her ovarian function. How is it possible to suppress her ovarian function? You can be using GnRH agonist, that is Buzeril. But in case a multiple choice question talks about postmenopausal lady, and that is one of the important points I want you to remember, because lots of questions in the exam are actually related to postmenopausal women, because that's where the incidence of breast cancer dramatically also increases. And the question will talk about a ER positive postmenopausal lady. In those circumstances, it is recommended to use aromatase inhibitors. What are the drugs? You see, what happens is that aromatase enzyme is present in the peripheral fat, and it continues to produce estrogen in a postmenopausal woman. It continues to produce estrogen from DHEAS, it continues to produce estrogen from testosterone. So the final output is that estrogen is still being produced in a postmenopausal woman from other products like DHEAS. So I want to suppress that. And the drugs that I have at my disposal are like anastrozole or letrozole. So it's relatively, I would say, when it comes to a postmenopausal ER positive lady, most of the time in the treatment we are using aromatase inhibitors. So from the MCQ perspective, this is definitely to be remembered, and the duration of therapy would be something in the range of 3 to 5 years. And one of the biggest disadvantages, because anyway she is postmenopausal, and you are giving a aromatase inhibitor, so that means her estrogen production is going down even further. So you can have very severe osteoporosis. So in case this lady falls in the bathroom, she can definitely end up with a possibility of a hip fracture. So it's important that bisphosphonates should be combined, because osteoporosis is a big side effect. So let me say you are already having a lady who maybe earlier had a fracture in the hip joint, and or she's having severe osteoporosis. So it's not a good idea to use aromatase inhibitors. So in that circumstances, what should you use? You will use tamoxifen. So that's why I've written here, if a lady cannot tolerate, remember my words, if she cannot tolerate aromatase inhibitors, then it is tamoxifen which is to be used. When it comes to chemotherapy, obviously there are a lot of side effects of chemotherapy, and that would change dramatically the life of the patient. The total number of cycles that would be required would be in range of 4 to 6. If you give more than 6 cycles, the disadvantage is the toxicity increases. So survival benefit is usually in the range of 4 to 6 cycles, and these cycles are usually given about 3 weeks apart. But in some cases, you will notice that on the slide I've written 2 weeks apart. So how are we, because the toxicity part is there. So I want you to remember, it is possible to use chemotherapeutic drugs, though very strong medicines are going to be used in this case, but they can be used every 2 weeks under cytokine support. The oldest regimen that we are using, even when I was a student at your age, was CMF. You very well are familiar with that, so I don't need to explain that. But I definitely want you to remember what we are using currently. That would be ACT, that is anthracyclines, and you very well know the cardiotoxicity component of anthracyclines. Then is cyclophosphamide, and then is taxane. So it is ACT, or we could be using, because if a person is already having, a lady is already having, let me say, very low ejection fraction, if I'm worried about cardiotoxicity of anthracycline, I'll be more comfortable using only TC, that is taxanes and cyclophosphamide. Among the taxanes, like docetaxel or paclitaxel, among the two classes, there is no survival advantage. I mean, you can use any of the two. It's not that docetaxel or paclitaxel, either of the two is having less toxicity, or they are more advantages one over the other. So he is saying that you can use any of the taxanes with cyclophosphamide. So the older regimen was CMF. Now we are using ACT. The only thing is the cardiac status of the patient should definitely be taken care of. Here, I want to tell you the fact that there is a term that you read by the name of neoadjuvant therapy. Now, when it comes to neoadjuvant therapy, the bottom line is that it helps you downstaging a cancer. You see, because when you give a neoadjuvant therapy before a surgery or before radiation, it would shrink the tumor. So, the mental approach of every doctor is that if I'm using neoadjuvant therapy, it will improve the survival chances of an individual. No. Shockingly, this is a line from Harrison, that new adjuvant therapy has not been documented to improve survival. Yes, it will help you in downstaging, which is a very paradoxical situation, because you see, on one hand, I'm saying it will shrink the tumor, but at the same time, the cancer could have already spread. So, current studies have not documented any survival advantage with new adjuvant treatment. Yes, it helps you downstage a tumor, it helps you in shrinking the size of the tumor before the surgery is done. So, a lot of inoperable cancers might actually become operable. Now, the side effects are very standard. I mean, obviously, nausea, vomiting, alopecia, that occurs in 100% of the patients. Nausea, vomiting can be managed, no big deal, but then alopecia has I would say, a component which is fairly personal from a patient's perspective. I mean, you need to maybe provide a wig to these people, you need to give emotional support to these people so that they are comfortable with this side effect. Neutropenia component can be handled with cytokine support, and you obviously need to be aware of potential secondary malignancy. Because you are using anti-cancer drugs, there's a possibility that these patients can develop a secondary myelodysplasia, or they can end up with development of a leukemia. So when you read the word secondary malignancy, breast cancer chemotherapy is definitely possible of causing it. Cardiotoxicity component I've already spoken about. And when it comes to taxanes, then you are very much aware of the fact that when it comes to taxanes, they are going to change the life of the person, because these patients are going to have a lifelong neuropathy. So benefits versus loss. The benefits are in the form of decreased chances of recurrence, improved chances of survival. So in spite of these horrible life changing, I'm using the word life changing side effects which are present in the patient, we still go ahead with chemotherapy, mainly because of the fact that I can say the recurrence and the total survival chances of the patient is dramatically increased. Then one treatment that has revolutionized the way we treat breast cancer patients is anti-HER2 therapy, that is trastuzumab. I want you to remember that this molecule, trastuzumab, can also contribute to cardiotoxicity, and because of this, you have to be very, very careful, because when you're giving anti-HER2 therapy with chemotherapy, you see, chemotherapy and anti-HER2 therapy may be given together. So at that point of time, you might have to stand down with anthracycline. So you need to be very, very clear that when trastuzumab is being given to the patient, then simultaneously anthracycline is not being given, because the combination of the two can definitely cause a cardiac damage in an individual. The total duration of therapy with trastuzumab can be up to 12 months. And if we can combine this with a newer molecule, the newer molecule is pertuzumab, then there is a higher pathological clinical remission. We are also having advantage of using tyrosine kinase inhibitors like lapatinib and neratinib for management of breast cancer patients, but they're relatively new drugs. We are also using tyrosine kinase inhibitors like lapatinib and neratinib for management of our patients, and in case we are having a trastuzumab resistance, we still have a solution for it. What is the solution that we are having for trastuzumab resistance? Well, we are having a novel drug, that is an antibody drug conjugate, that is going to be adotrastuzumab emtansine. Though I've already spoken about the fact that aromatase inhibitors can contribute to osteoporosis, so bisphosphonate support is to be used. And another novel molecule which is available now is called as PARP inhibitors. Now, when I say about PARP inhibitors, though you can read about them from pharmacology, PARP would stand for poly-ADP ribose polymerase inhibitor, and the drugs available are palbociclib and ribociclib. These are novel agents, they are the newer agents, and the efficacy of these is being tested as of now. So, when it comes to treatment of our patients, our treatment is mainly based on immunohistochemical staining.
Thank you, Dr. Marva. I am Dr. Govind Rai Garg. So I will be talking about drugs used in breast cancer. Several group of drugs can be used in breast cancer. We will broadly divide them into cytotoxic drugs and newer drugs. The cytotoxic drugs, the groups include alkylating agents. Alkylating agents, the main drug which is used is cyclophosphamide. Alkylating agents, as the name tells, what they do, they will attach the alkyl group to DNA. So this is one DNA, this is another DNA. So normally these two DNAs behave separately. When we give alkylating agents, they will attach the alkyl group to these DNAs, resulting in formation of dimers. These dimers normally do not exist. So the enzymes in the cell, they feel that these are foreign DNA, so they will attack the DNA and destroy the DNA. That lead to death of the cell, and the cancer can be treated. Yeah. And cyclophosphamide, you need to remember two major adverse effects. One, cyclophosphamide, it causes pulmonary fibrosis. And if you remember from my previous lectures, the drugs causing pulmonary fibrosis, you can remember in their name there is presence of some vehicle, like cyclophosphamide, it has cycle in the name. We have busulfan, which contains bus in the name. Methotrexate, which contains truck in the name. Amiodarone, which contains drone in the name. Bleomycin, blow. All these vehicles will blow the horn. Clear? So these can cause pulmonary fibrosis. Cyclophosphamide can cause pulmonary fibrosis. Second important adverse effect of cyclophosphamide to remember, cyclophosphamide can cause hemorrhagic cystitis. It produces a toxic metabolite called as acrolein, which can cause hemorrhagic cystitis, and this can be prevented by giving a drug called Mesna, mercaptoethane sulfonic acid, short form Mesna. It is used to prevent hemorrhagic cystitis due to cyclophosphamide. Okay. Then second group of drugs which are used are anti-metabolites. They will stop the metabolism, interfere with the purine or pyrimidine metabolism, so formation of DNA will not occur. Methotrexate, we know methotrexate, it required LFT monitoring, liver function test monitoring, whereas 5-fluorouracil and capecitabine, they can cause hand and foot syndrome. Gemcitabine, apart from breast cancer, which we are discussing, it is drug of choice for pancreatic carcinoma. Used in breast cancer, but drug of choice in pancreatic carcinoma. Okay. Another group of cytotoxic drugs, they include mitotic spindle inhibitors. So we all know, for division of a cell, first the spindle is formed and then it is broken down. So if we stop any of these two processes, the cell cannot divide. So we can stop the growth of tumor. So these are the drugs targeting the mitotic spindle. They act on M phase of the cell cycle specifically. And these drugs like vinblastine, apart from causing the standard side effects like bone marrow suppression, vinblastine can cause peripheral neuropathy as a side effect. Then paclitaxel and docetaxel, these are called as taxanes. Taxanes group of drugs. We have some special preparations like nanoparticles of paclitaxel also for anti-cancer therapy. Then these are the newer drugs like eribulin and ixabepilone. They also act by inhibiting the mitotic spindle. Okay. The next group of drug which is very important is topoisomerase inhibitors, and in particular the most important drug is doxorubicin, also called as adriamycin. Another drug which is used in breast cancer from topoisomerase inhibitor group is epirubicin. These are both called as anthracyclines. The group is anthracycline group. We all know topoisomerase, it helps in replication of DNA by causing uncoiling of DNA. So when we inhibit this, DNA cannot uncoil, so it cannot replicate. Clear? But special point to remember, doxorubicin is cardiotoxic. It can cause congestive heart failure, cardiomyopathy. It can cause damage to heart. Clear? And you can remember from the name, D for doxorubicin, D for दिल को affect करती है. Doxorubicin दिल को affect करती है, cardiotoxic है, and you can prevent this cardiotoxicity by giving a drug called as dexrazoxane. Dexrazoxane can prevent cardiotoxicity due to doxorubicin. Okay. Now, second group of drug which we can use in breast cancer are hormonal drugs. Remember, breast cancer, it may express the estrogen and progesterone receptors. Estrogen receptor, they tend to grow the breast cancer. Remember, estrogen is a stimulus for the breast cells. So breast cancer, if they express estrogen receptors, we can target to decrease estrogen levels or block estrogen receptor to treat the cancer. So these are the drugs with hormonal drugs, they target the estrogen receptors mainly. So if you see gonadotropin releasing hormone agonist, if we give continuously, non-pulsatile manner, we continuously give GnRH agonist, they decrease the sex hormones including estrogen. So when estrogen decreases, we can treat breast cancer. And the drug we use is goserelin. Remember, any drug ending with relin is GnRH agonist. So goserelin can be used, but it need to be given by injection. Commonly it is given by subcutaneous route. Then we have selective estrogen receptor modulators. And if you remember, these are the drugs which will be estrogen receptor agonist in some tissue and antagonist in some tissues. So obviously we will want estrogen receptor antagonist in the breast tissue because we want to treat breast cancer. And these drugs are tamoxifen and toramifen. These are estrogen receptor antagonist in the breast. But at some places they are agonist also. The additional advantage of tamoxifen like drug is they also decrease the osteoporosis, or we can say improve the formation of bone. But the major disadvantage, tamoxifen can cause thromboembolism. And second, tamoxifen is also associated with increased risk of endometrial carcinoma. Apart from the estrogenic side effects, tamoxifen, it can cause problem in the vision. It can cause cataracts, affect the eye. Clear? And tamoxifen is oral drug and it can be used to prevent the breast cancer in the other breast. Okay. Another drug is selective estrogen receptor down regulator. If the ER positive breast cancer is resistant to tamoxifen, we can try to down regulate the estrogen receptor, and that drug is fulvestrant. Fulvestrant, from the name you can remember, it is saying ester ant, means estrogen antagonist. It is not an antagonist, basically it decreases the number of receptors. It is more powerful than tamoxifen, and another advantage is it need to be given infrequently. Infrequently means tamoxifen is given daily, whereas fulvestrant initially it is given after 15 days, but after 1 month it is given every month. So it is given intramuscularly once in a month. Clear? Then another group of drug are aromatase inhibitors. They are in particularly useful in postmenopausal breast cancer. Tamoxifen, it is used in both premenopausal as well as postmenopausal period, but aromatase inhibitors are indicated only in postmenopausal breast cancer. They will not be effective that much in premenopausal breast cancer. Remember, aromatase is an enzyme which convert androgen to estrogen. So aromatase inhibitors, they stop this function. That means estrogen will not be produced. But in premenopausal women, ovary is already producing estrogen. So these will not be that much effective. So letrozole, anastrozole, exemestane, they are aromatase inhibitors, which are hormonal drugs for ER positive breast cancer. Okay. Then moving to some new drugs. And among the new drugs, the most important are monoclonal antibodies. So apart from ER and PR, that means estrogen and progesterone receptors, many breast cancers, they express HER2 upon new also. HER2 receptor is also expressed on the breast cancer. So trastuzumab and pertuzumab, these are two monoclonal antibodies, the name ending with mab, monoclonal antibodies. They are monoclonal antibody against HER2 upon new gene. Clear? So they are used in HER2 positive breast cancer. And there are several monoclonal derivatives of trastuzumab in which it is attached to some toxin, attached to some cytotoxic drug. So that means like in this deroxytecan or amitriptyline, what is happening is trastuzumab, it will bind to HER2 receptor on the tumor cell. And then in that tumor cell, these cytotoxic substances will enter and kill those cells. Clear? Then trastuzumab, it is involved in causing cardiotoxicity. This is very important. Trastuzumab can cause cardiotoxicity. Which other drug we discussed? This doxorubicin, that was also causing cardiotoxicity. Trastuzumab can also cause cardiotoxicity. So how to remember this? So first of all, remember, do not trust a person with breast. Clear? So you can remember trust. तो ब्रेस्ट वालों को ट्रस्ट नहीं करना है, तो ब्रेस्ट कैंसर में ट्रास्टुजुमैब यूज होती। एंड सेकंड थिंग, अगर ट्रस्ट करोगे तो दिल तो टूटेगा ही ना, तो ट्रास्टुजुमैब दिल तोड़ देती है, कार्डियोटॉक्सिसिटी कर देती है, हार्ट को डैमेज करती है। सो वी सेड कि ब्रेस्ट वाले पे ट्रस्ट नहीं करना, पर तू फिर भी करेगा pertuzumab, so that is also drug belonging to similar group. Pertuzumab is usually added to trastuzumab to improve the outcome. Okay. Then we have another drug called as atezolizumab. Atezolizumab is indicated in triple negative breast cancer. That means ER negative, PR negative, HER2 negative. If you see what atezolizumab do, normally this is the tumor cell. But for fighting against tumor cell, we normally have T cells. Normal immunity is there. What happens is, whenever programmed death ligand present on the tumor cell, it interacts with programmed death antigens or receptors on the this T cell. On the T cell we have PD-1, whereas on the tumor cell we have ligand. So when they combine, then it will result in negative selection. Negative selection means this T cell will become ineffective. So tumor cells, what they have expressed is, what they have done is, they have expressed a pathway to evade this immunity. So what they do, they express a programmed death ligand 1. This bind to PD-1 present on the T cells. So now this T cell will become ineffective. So it will not recognize the tumor cell. So if we stop this interaction, then T cell will kill the tumor cell. So that is done by atezolizumab, but it stop this interaction between the PD-1 and PD-L1. So now this negative selection does not happen. So T cell remain active, so it will kill the tumor cell. Clear? So atezolizumab acts by that mechanism. Then we have a new drug called as secukinumab govitecan. Secukinumab govitecan, what it do is, similar to trastuzumab, it is also binding to tumor cell, but at different place. It binds to a place called as TROP2. It is an antibody against TROP2. So when the secukinumab binds to TROP2, now the govitecan, which basically is a cytotoxic, which is called as SN38. If you remember the name Tecan, do you remember any other drug with the name Tecan? Yes, irinotecan. Irinotecan, the metabolite of irinotecan, active metabolite of irinotecan is SN38. Clear? So secukinumab is attached to SN38. So what will happen when secukinumab bind to TROP2 on the breast cancer cells? Now SN38 will selectively enter the breast cancer cells and it will start killing those cells. Clear? And this will release SN38 near about also, so other tumor cells can also be killed near about. Clear? So basically antigen toxin conjugate. Clear? Now apart from monoclonal antibodies, another group of new drugs in cancer, breast cancer, are tyrosine kinase inhibitors. Special thing to remember, all tyrosine kinase inhibitor, the name end with nib. Here also the name is ending with nib. Lapatinib, niratinib, and tucatinib. The name ends with nib, and all tyrosine kinase inhibitors are effective orally. These are oral drugs. Lapatinib and niratinib, they inhibit both HER1. HER1 is epidermal growth factor receptor, and HER2. HER2 we just discussed. So it is a dual tyrosine kinase inhibitor, whereas this new drug tucatinib, it is HER2 inhibitor, specific HER2 inhibitor only. Clear? Another group of new drugs in breast cancer are cyclin-dependent kinase inhibitors. Cyclin-dependent kinase inhibitors like ribociclib, palbociclib, and abemaciclib. And from the name itself, you can remember their name contains cycli. So cycli means cyclin-dependent kinase inhibitors, and name ends with B means they are used in breast cancer. Clear? And two drugs in the beginning have O also, that means they are effective orally. So all these are oral cyclin-dependent kinase inhibitors used in breast cancer. Okay. Then another group of drug is PARP inhibitor, poly-ADP ribose polymerase inhibitors. So basically what PARP do? Poly-ADP ribose polymerase, it help in DNA repair. So what is known as some breast cancer cells which are BRCA1 or BRCA2 positive. In these cells specifically, when we give a PARP inhibitor, they will inhibit the repair of DNA. So when DNA is not able to repair, these tumor cells will selectively die. So these drugs are olaparib and talazoparib, and again from the name you can remember their name contains parib. So parib stands for poly-ADP ribose. So parib says poly-ADP ribose polymerase inhibitors. So these are also used in breast cancer. Other drugs in breast cancer, there are some more drugs which can be used. These include mammalian target of rapamycin inhibitors, which is everolimus. Remember, this is a drug belonging to sirolimus group of drugs. Then we have PI3 kinase inhibitors like alpelisib and bisphosphonates. Bisphosphonates, they not only improve the bone mineral density, but they can also be useful in metastatic disease. These are pamidronate. So these all can be used in breast cancer. So now I will like to invite Dr. Vivek Jain to complete and conclude the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Govind Rai Garg, for such a comprehensive yet concise, high-yield information on drugs and pharmacology behind the breast cancer control in the population. Thank you, sir. So friends, now I will wrap up this topic with prevention and control of breast cancer. Friends, I will be covering this topic in context of Indian scenario and the health programs and legislations related to breast carcinoma. So first, starting with prevention of breast cancer, we look at primary prevention when the risk factors are already present. Friends, as all of us know, early menarche and late menopause are two well-established risk factors for breast carcinoma. So we can target them. So if we can reduce childhood obesity and we can promote strenuous physical activity among the girls and women, it is definitely going to help in reduction of breast carcinoma. Now, these two interventions work on two different fronts. Number one, they increase the average age of menarche in the girls, and number two, they help in decreasing the frequency of ovulation after the menarche occurs. Friends, all of us know that fat intake is an established risk factor for breast carcinoma. So as a primary prevention measure, we can reduce the fat intake in diet of girls and women. Now moving on to the next level of prevention, that is secondary level of prevention. Now friends, secondary level of prevention, most important intervention could be timely screening of breast cancer. Now how do we screen for breast cancer? Breast cancer could be screened by the simple technique of breast self-examination. Although this technique is plagued with high false positive, high false negative rates, but please remember, in a developing country like India, it is quite useful for health education purposes in younger females, because younger females may not be very outgoing or outcoming by going to a health center for physical checkup, but this they can do at their home themselves. Besides breast self-examination, screening could also be undertaken by clinical physical palpation or examination by a physician or a surgeon, or mammography, one of the best tests recommended for screening of breast carcinoma. Now friends, mammography is quite a useful test. Only problem with mammography is its limitation related to age of the woman, just because of higher breast tissue density, and there is a chance that important lesion could be missed, because breast cancer in India has a bimodal distribution. Bimodal means two peaks are seen at different age groups. One is seen in older women, like all countries of the world, but in our country we also see one peak in younger females less than 40 years of age. So in those females, mammography may not be the best test to be recommended. In fact, for younger females and overall, one of the ideal tests recommended for screening is MRI. Now, problem with MRI is it may not be used as a screening test in a resource limited or developing country like India, because it is very expensive, plus its availability is not there at all parts of the country. So there are 5 major screening tests which are used. One is breast self-examination, second is clinical breast examination, third is mammography, fourth is MRI, and fifth with a limited use has been ultrasonography. Diagnosis is confirmed by biopsy, which may be preceded by fine needle aspiration cytology if required. Now friends, why we are looking at timely screening? Because screening may help in early diagnosis and prompt treatment, possibly which will lead to more effective treatment, better prognosis, better survival. Besides timely screening, equally important is regular follow-up. In fact, WHO recommends that breast cancer screening should be undertaken once every 1 to 2 years in the age group 50 to 69 years of age. And yes, although it is dependent on receptor status, a major role is played by treatment, both medical including chemotherapy as well as surgical including radiotherapy. Now friends, development of so many new effective drugs for breast cancer, advancements in surgery and radiotherapy. Now there is a big role of tertiary prevention also in control of breast carcinoma. So focus has to be on strengthening the comprehensive therapy institutions, strengthening the palliative therapy and the support after the surgery or the treatment, and rehabilitation of survivor is a key component of tertiary prevention of breast carcinoma. Now friends, if I were to list national health programs and legislations which are involved or related to breast carcinoma in the country, this will include the oldest one, NCCP, National Cancer Control Program 1975-76, National Cancer Registry Program NCRP, which was launched by ICMR in 1982, District Cancer Control Program, which was modified later, 1990-91, Cigarette Acts 1975, along with that COTPA 2003. What is COTPA? This is cigarettes and other tobacco products, prohibition of advertisement, regulation of trade and commerce, production, supply and distribution Act 2003. NTCP, National Tobacco Control Program, launched in 2007, and the latest one, NPCDCS, National Program for Prevention and Control of Cancer, Diabetes mellitus, cardiovascular diseases and stroke. When we look at NCRP, National Cancer Registry Program, in India, two types of cancer registry exist. These are population-based cancer registry and second one is hospital-based cancer registry. There are two major functions of these cancer registries. Number one, they help you in assessment of magnitude of cancers in the country total cancer load, which cancer has highest incidence, which cancer has how much prevalence, and so on. So this will, second important utility, it will help us in planning this service delivery according to the existing situation. Also, you must know, for population based cancer registry, we need a size of around 2 to 7 million population. This was the logo of National Cancer Control Program, NCCP of India. Now, when we look at National Tobacco Control Program, that is year 2007, it had 5 major objectives. Number 1, increase awareness about the harmful effects of tobacco with the population. Number 2, decrease the production of harmful tobacco and tobacco related products in the country. Number 3, it aimed to help quit tobacco use among the users. Number 4, it aimed to support the COTPA Act. And number 5, it aimed at working for WHO framework for Convention of Tobacco Control. When we look at tobacco control legislations in the country, they focused on 3 major intervention areas. What were these? Number 1 was complete ban on advertising of tobacco and tobacco related products across different media in the country. Alongside, there was also a provision for prohibition of smoking in public places, and fine has also been placed in use. Second important intervention, there has been implementation throughout the country that tobacco and tobacco related products will not be sold to the minors, and this minor is taken as anyone aged below 18 years, and any such outlet should not be located within the vicinity of an educational institution also. And third important intervention was pictorial warnings related to the harmful effects of tobacco use have to be displayed prominently on tobacco products like cigarette packs, etc. National Cancer Control Program in the year 2010 was merged with a more comprehensive, bigger program, NPC DCS. This is National Program for Prevention and Control of Cancer, Diabetes mellitus, Cardiovascular Diseases and Stroke. This is the logo of NPC DCS program, and if you look at important components or provision of services under this program, it includes Regional Cancer Center Scheme. Now friends, what are these regional cancer centers? They were designated as referral centers for the complicated cases of cancers including breast carcinoma. Oncology Wing Development Scheme. Here, both center and state played a collaborative role where center provided the equipment like cobalt unit and state provided the manpower for development of a oncology wing in a hospital or a medical college. Decentralized NGO scheme was another its important component where their main role was IEC activities and health education for the common population. IEC activities at central level were strengthened and research and training component was included as an important part of cancer control and prevention strategy in the country. Under this program, currently there are 100 district hospitals where 4 important services are available. These are diagnosis, chemotherapy, surgical management, and an equally important 4th component, that is palliative care. Now friends, just to wrap up the topic finally, let's look at some interesting quick facts about breast cancer or cancer overall. Friends, can you tell me, when do we observe National Cancer Awareness Day in the country? Very right, it is observed on 7th of November every year. Friends, what is a cancer awareness logo? How does it look like? Okay, you tell me first. How does a breast cancer awareness logo or symbol look like? Very right. It is an inverted ribbon which is pink in color. Now friends, if you go different cancer wise, there are total 26 different colored ribbons for different types of cancers. We cannot remember everything. So remember two important ones. Number one, breast cancer inverted ribbon is pink color. And cancer overall, the inverted ribbon is lavender color. Where do we have National Cancer Institute of India? It is located at, yes, Jhajjar, Haryana, under the mentorship of AIMS. Another recently asked question, friends, what is hospice? Many of your medical colleges, hospitals or cancer hospitals have a hospice unit attached to them. So what is a hospice? Hospice is a institution which is mainly meant for palliative care, not cure or treatment. I am saying palliative care for end stage cancer patients or old age cancer patients who have no other place to go. With this, friends, we come to the end of today's topic, breast cancer. On behalf of Top Educators Life, I thank you for your time and wish you all the best for a grand success in the forthcoming examinations. So guys and girls, what are you waiting for? Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Top Educators Live, and press the bell icon if you want to get notification whenever a new video is posted. We will keep on posting academic videos of similar nature, interviews with topper, guidance videos from top educators on how to prepare for the forthcoming examination, and also non-academic fun videos through this channel. So friends, I now pass on the baton again to sir for asking today's all important question.
And therefore whatever I have said can actually be helpful for solving a multiple choice question, and if you get this question right, then you definitely have a chance for getting a free app from any of the top 5 educators. I mean, you can obviously select whichever you want, that would be complimentary for you. You have to mention the correct answer uh, in the chat box below, and at the same time, if you can enter your email id along with that, it would be beneficial because that would help us getting to you relatively faster. There's a possibility that multiple people might get this question correct, so there's always a software that we have handy that will be selecting the lucky candidate. The highlight of this question is the immunohistochemical staining, so that's the hint that I'm giving you. And yeah, this is a postmenopausal lady, so if you are gonna listen to this discussion, I'm very sure that you would definitely be able to crack this question. In this lockdown, guys, stay safe. Thank you so much for hearing us out patiently, and we'll continue with much more lectures like these, much more interactive discussions like these, so that we can continue adding to your knowledge base. Thank you so much for your patience.